The year is 610 CE. The world is divided by two colossal superpowers. In the west, the Byzantine Empire stands as the heir to Rome, draped in gold, marble, and military might. In the east, the Sasanian Persian Empire rules with an iron fist, boasting centuries of ancient, untouchable heritage. These two titans have fought each other for generations, entirely consumed by their own rivalry. But as the emperors of Rome and Persia looked south toward the Arabian Peninsula, they saw nothing but empty, blistering sand. To them, Arabia was a wasteland. It was too harsh to conquer, too fractured to unify, and too poor to matter. The greatest empires in the world, Rome and Persia, completely ignored the Arabian Peninsula. They thought it was a worthless, uninhabitable desert filled with warring tribes. They had absolutely no idea that within just a few decades, a force would emerge from those very sands that would completely crush the Persian Empire and bring the mighty Romans to their knees. The revolution wasn't going to come from a palace, it was going to come from a cave. They could not have been more wrong. They did not know that the world was about to be turned upside down, not by an army, not by an emperor, but by a single man sitting alone in a mountain cave who was about to receive a message that would echo through eternity. This is the story of the birth of Islam. To understand the magnitude of what happened on that mountain, we must first understand the darkness of the world below it. The Arabs call the era before Islam Jahiliyyah, the age of ignorance. Arabia was a society living on the bleeding edge of survival. Because resources like water and grazing land were incredibly scarce, loyalty to your tribe was the only law that mattered. If someone wronged a member of your tribe, it would spark brutal blood feuds that could last for 100 years. There was no central government, no police, no overarching justice system. Might made right, and the strong devoured the weak. At the center of this harsh world was the city of Mecca. Mecca was not an agricultural paradise. It was a barren, rocky valley. But its true power lay in a cube-shaped structure sitting in the heart of the city, the Kaaba. Built centuries earlier by the prophet Abraham, and his son Ismail, the Kaaba was originally constructed for the worship of one God. But over the centuries, the pure message of monotheism had been corrupted, twisted by time and tradition. By the 7th century, the Kaaba was filled with 360 idols. Different tribes worshipped different gods made of stone, wood, and date paste. Mecca became a wealthy, untouchable trading hub. The elite tribe, the Quraysh, controlled the Kaaba and grew incredibly rich off the pilgrims who traveled across the desert to worship these idols. During the sacred months, the markets of Ukaz would overflow with merchants. But the Arabs didn't just trade silk and spices, they traded words. Poetry was the lifeblood of Jahiliyyah. A brilliant poet could elevate a tribe's status to the heavens or destroy a rival's reputation with a single verse. They were masters of language. Yet, despite their poetic brilliance, it was a society entirely devoid of spiritual mercy. Orphans were neglected, women were treated as inherited property, and the burial of newborn daughters out of shame or poverty was a horrific yet openly accepted practice. It was a society enveloped in total spiritual darkness. But not everyone was consumed by this ignorance. A man named Muhammad, born in the year 570 CE, had grown up in the very heart of Mecca. From the moment he entered the world, hardship shaped him. His father died before he was born. His mother passed away when he was only 6. His grandfather, who took him in, died when he was 8. Raised by his uncle, Abu Talib, Muhammad spent his youth working as a shepherd. Away from the noise and arrogance of the city, he spent countless days and nights guiding flocks through the silent, rugged hills of Mecca. It was a humble profession, one shared by Moses, David, and many prophets before him. The isolation of the desert taught him profound patience, reflection, and care for the vulnerable. Despite growing up among the elite Quraysh, he never participated in their vices. He never drank alcohol. He never bowed to a statue. He was so renowned for his flawless honesty that even his enemies entrusted him with their wealth. The entire city of Mecca knew him by one title, Al-Amin, the trustworthy. When a merchant from Yemen was cheated out of his goods by a powerful Meccan elite, the young Muhammad joined a coalition called Hilf al-Fudul, the League of the Virtuous. They swore an oath to protect anyone in Mecca who was oppressed, regardless of their tribe. Even in the depths of Jahiliyyah, his heart was naturally inclined toward justice. As Muhammad reached his late 30s, the moral decay of Mecca became unbearable to him. The wealth, the idolatry, the cruelty, it physically pained him. He began to withdraw. He would climb a steep, treacherous mountain on the outskirts of the city called Jabal al-Nur, the mountain of light. Near the jagged peak, there was a small, narrow cave called Hira. It offered a quiet, uninterrupted view of the Kaaba far below. He would spend days, sometimes weeks, in this cave, taking only a little water and provisions. He sat in the silence, fasting, contemplating the heavens, and searching for the truth. Then came the final third of the month of Ramadan, in the year 610 CE. Muhammad was 40 years old. He was alone in the dead of night when the atmosphere in the cave suddenly shifted. The profound silence of the desert was shattered by a presence so overwhelming it filled the entire horizon. It was the angel Gabriel, the exact same angel who had descended to deliver the word of God to Moses and Jesus. The angel approached the solitary man and delivered a single, terrifying command. Iqra, read. Imagine the shock. The angel Jibril appears in a dark cave and commands the Prophet Muhammad to read. But the Prophet was an unlettered man. He did not know how to read or write. He replied in fear, "I am not a reader." The angel embraced him so tightly he felt the breath squeezed from his lungs, let him go, and commanded again, "Read." 3 times this happened until the very first words of the Quran were revealed. "I am not a reader," Muhammad replied, trembling. The angel caught him and embraced him with a force so immense that Muhammad felt his very soul being pressed. The angel released him, and the command struck him again. "Read." Again he answered, "I am not a reader." A 3rd time, the angel embraced him, pressing him until he reached the absolute limits of human endurance. Then he released him and spoke the very first verses of the noble Quran. "Read in the name of your Lord who created man from a clinging substance. Read, and your Lord is the most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man that which he knew not." The sheer physical and spiritual weight of the revelation left the prophet trembling violently. The angel vanished as quickly as he had appeared, leaving Muhammad utterly alone on the mountain. He stumbled out of the cave and rushed down the rocky slopes of Jabal al-Nur, his heart pounding against his ribs. He was terrified. What had he just seen? Was he losing his mind? He bypassed the markets, bypassed the Kaaba, and rushed directly to the one person who anchored his life, his beloved wife, Khadijah. "Cover me," he pleaded, shivering as though he had a severe fever. Khadijah wrapped him in a cloak. When the terror finally subsided, he looked at his wife and said, "I fear for my life." But Khadijah did not hesitate. She looked at her husband and spoke words that would become the foundation of the Muslim Ummah. She said, "Never. By God, God will never disgrace you. You keep good relations with your kin. You help the poor. You serve your guests generously, and you assist those afflicted by calamity." Khadijah immediately recognized that a man of such pure character could not be deceived by demons. She was the very first person to accept his message. She was the first believer. But Khadijah knew they needed guidance. She took her husband to her elderly cousin, Waraka bin Nawfal. Waraka was a blind Christian monk who had studied the ancient scriptures in Hebrew and Aramaic. He knew the prophecies of the old world. When the prophet described the immense being in the cave, Waraka's blind eyes widened. He recognized the signs immediately. "This is the Namus," Waraka declared, his voice trembling with awe. "The great confidant, the angel of revelation, who was sent down to Moses." Then the old monk's voice dropped into a sorrowful warning. "I wish I were young, so I could support you when your people drive you out." The prophet was shocked. "Will they drive me out?" he asked. After all, he was Al-Amin. He was beloved by his city. "Yes," Waraka replied heavily. "No man has ever brought what you have brought without being met with hostility." Waraka's words sealed his fate. The quiet, isolated life of Muhammad the Shepherd was over. The mission of Muhammad, the messenger of God, had begun. That single night in the Cave of Hira was the spark. The message of Tawheed, the absolute oneness of God, had officially returned to the Arabian Peninsula. The idols of the Quraysh were put on notice. The corrupt, brutal social order of Mecca was about to be challenged by a message that demanded justice, equality, and total submission to the Creator alone. Far to the north, the emperors of Rome and Persia continued to fight their exhausting wars, completely oblivious to the shifting sands. They did not know that the man who would change the trajectory of human history had just walked down a mountain. The age of ignorance was ending. The era of Islam had arrived.